This home is useless to me now. I'll get into that and then get into the latest home prices and insights for York Region for week ending September 4th, 2024. This home is useless to me now. That's what a buyer told me. Imagine hearing that. Now, I represented the seller. I did not represent the buyer. I was working for the seller. And in this case, this was an estate sale. The executor is the one who hired me to sell the property. And we sold the property with no representation or warranties and as is. It was an older home on a large lot. The executor asked me to sell it, and that's what I did. We even had a clause in the agreement that said the buyer is buying this with as is where is, with no representation or warranties whatsoever. However, the buyer called me 2 months after closing. Now remember, I didn't represent the buyer. They had their own agent, but the buyer's calling me now saying, Santo, this home is useless to me now. I cannot build a pool and cabana in the backyard. I'm thinking, well, that's easy enough to find out. Why didn't, before you put in an offer, or put in an offer with a condition that you're going to check with the city and find out before you bought the home? Well, the buyer didn't do that. Their agent didn't do that. Nobody did that. The only thing we know for sure is that they purchased a home knowing they were buying it without any representations or warranties. That's the only thing we know for sure. Nobody asked me as the listing agent and said, hey, we're planning to build a pool and cabana in the backyard. It was a large lot. It definitely has the space to do that. But apparently there's something to do with the ravine in the back and it's protected land, and the setback would not allow them to do what they wanted to do. Well, they should have done this up front. The agent should have, at the very least, inquired with the buyer and say, hey, are you planning to do anything with this lot? And then do their due diligence. The buyer, who's the one responsible for the purchase, paying the mortgage, should have expressed to their client, to their agent, say, hey, we're planning to build a pool back here. Is it allowed? And nobody on the buying end did any kind of due diligence, and they're calling me, or the buyer's calling me saying property's useless to them now. What can I do? I'm not going to tell my seller, the executive, say, hey, it's 2 months after closing, let's give them their money back. That ain't happening. My client is fully protected with the clause that was there. The buyer was not represented properly, and the buyer should have on their own thought, hey, is this even allowed? Folks, if you're buying a property and you got plans, you should make sure your plans will be approved. If you want to add an extension to your property, just because it looks like there's plenty of room to do it, doesn't mean the city is going to be okay with you doing it. There's all sorts of setback rules and how much square footage the home takes, the lot, the home's footprint takes of the total lot. There's all sorts of ratios and percentages you've got to consider. And just because it's allowed in one part of the city doesn't mean it's allowed in a different neighborhood. So if you have plans, make sure that, especially with, the kind of prices we're talking about, you buy a decent detached property in York Region, it's, you're starting somewhere at 1.5, and that's for a small one that needs a ton of work. If you're buying anything that's larger, nicer, you're in the $2 million range. Do your homework. At least let your agent know what you want to do so your agent can do the homework for you and present you and get everything in writing that, the city will allow you to do this, this, and that. Otherwise, I could tell you, calling the listing agent and saying, hey, now what do I do? You're not going to get anywhere. It's not going to help you. And that's what this buyer did, thinking, I can do something about this. My job was to sell the property, protect my client, who was the seller, and we protected him with the clause. I couldn't possibly predict everything a buyer wants to do. They should, on their own, do their own research. So if you're working with an agent, make sure they're doing some of this research for you. Make sure you express to your agent the things you want to do, and make sure it's allowed. If you feel this video can help somebody, please pass it along. If you get value from what we're talking about, subscribe. And if you want to speak with me about your real estate situation, selling, buying, it's really simple. Up here, there's a link to my calendar. Below this video in the description, there's a link to my calendar. Click on that, book a time that's convenient for you, and we'll talk about whatever's on your mind. Now, let's get into the numbers for York Region. Here we go, folks. Let's take a close look what's happening with York Region home prices. Now, our focus is detached properties only. We're looking at Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham. These are average sold prices for 3 months. Prices are way down from where they were a little while ago. Let's start with Vaughan. Now, I do have to say, it'll come up with Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham, and any part of the GTA that we talk about. This week, we're focused on week ending September 4th, what happened during that week. It is a week that had the Labor Day long weekend in the middle of it. So that will almost for sure affect sales, volume. It'll affect a lot of things. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at some of these numbers. For example, for week ending September 4th, in Vaughan, only 15 detached properties were sold. The weeks prior to that was 24, 21, 26. We tend to see a much fewer sales when it comes to a long weekend. And Labor Day long weekend is one of the, I'll say, larger celebrated long weekends. So 15 detached properties were sold. 2 of those were at $2 million or more. Average sold price is $1,569,000. I'm moving back to kind of show you the whole chart so my head doesn't get in the way. And we have a whole year here on the board. Compared to last year, 1,569 is 10% lower year over year. The median price is 12% lower. Of the 15 that sold, 20% of those sold at list price or more. We used to be in the 40 percentile selling at list price or more. That percentage has come down where we're now at 20. We're half of that. Listings, we went from 45 listings to 61 listings. So we are seeing a bunch of properties come online as new listings. Now, new listings could be listed for the first time this year, or properties that were on the market before the fall got canceled and now are being relisted. It still comes on as a new listing. So 61 were listed. Now, when we look at active listings, meaning the amount of properties or detached properties in this case actually available for sale, there's 455 in Vaughan. We sold 15. In other words, what we're saying is 3.3% of all the properties available for sale, only 3.3% actually sold for the week, September the 4th. Months of inventory shot up there. It's now at 7 months of inventory. Months of inventory has been increasing, trending upwards. We're now at 7 months, but that's based on the sales for week ending September the 4th. I would feel, and from my experience of even being in the field with buyers and sellers, it's not really 7 months of inventory. We'll see that come down over the next week or two when we kind of get more into a typical real estate routine where there's no long weekend involved. Here's Richmond Hill for week ending September the 4th, 10 detached properties sold. 2 of those were at $2 million or more. average sold price came down to $1,627,000. 1,627 is 11% lower than where we were this time a year ago. The median price of 1,606 is 5% lower than where we were this time a year ago. 10 were sold, almost a third, 30% sold at list price or more. Listings are way up. We went from 32 listings to 59 listings, and 2.7% of all the properties available for sale actually sold. So percentage, not a lot of sales going on there based on everything that's available. Months of inventory, way up there at 8.6 months of inventory. Here's Markham. 16 detached properties were sold. No properties sold at $2 million or more. Average sold price way down to $1,526,000. Remember, it's a Labor Day long weekend. So 1,526 is 9% lower year over year. The median price is 4% lower year over year. 16 were sold. 19% of those sold at list price or more. We used to be in the 50s and 60% just 3 months ago for June. 50 and 60% selling at list price or more. We're now at 19%. And 4.7% of the detached properties in Markham that are available for sale, only 4.7% sold. So that's low, 4.7, but it is higher than Vaughan and Richmond Hill. Months of inventory sitting at 4.9 months of inventory, right at the top end of a balanced market. Here's a quick summary. In most cases, you're going to be experiencing a buyer's market. In other cases, you're going to experience a balanced market. That's the Vaughan, Richmond Hill, and Markham report for detached properties for week ending September the 4th. Thanks for watching. Have an awesome day.